Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the budget study session of the San Gabriel City Council. We are now in session. First item will be the pledge, Pledge of Allegiance, led by Councilmember Costanzo.
If everybody would please stand, place your right hand over your heart and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Costanzo. Roll call, please.
Mayor Pooh,
Here.
Vice Mayor Menchaca,
Here.
Councilmember Costanzo,
Here.
Councilmember Harrington,
Here.
Councilmember Leal.
Here.
Okay, next item.
Public comment. Pursuant to revisions of Government Code Section 54957, this is the time provided for members of the public to address the City Council regarding matters on this agenda. Public comments will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. You will receive a 30-second warning as you approach the end of your time. As a reminder, please be respectful of all speakers regardless of the position they take. If you wish to address the City Council, please complete a speaker's request card and hand it to the clerk. When speaking, please state your name for the record.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. We have one card so far. It's from Elias Borgelli. Elias, welcome.
Hello. Thank you. So good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank you for giving me just a few moments tonight to speak to you on behalf of the Playhouse staff. I think you could all agree that we have had one difficult year with so much uncertainty and personnel shifting like teacups at Disneyland. But I would like to talk to you tonight about some of the comments made about the Playhouse and the value it is to our community in San Gabriel. In August of last year, we were notified of major staffing changes regarding our senior management team. Although we had many questions and the future was uncertain, we pushed on with all of our scheduled projects while taking on additional responsibilities and working cohesively as a team. We worked hard to continue moving the Playhouse in the direction that our department management staff had set for us. We worked within our capabilities, being short-staffed and all, in bringing our community innovative, artistically driven, and engaging programming at very little to no cost to our patrons. Our focus was set, as it had been by our previous director, to not be in the business of making money for the city, but to provide these opportunities for our citizens. Since August, the staff of the Playhouse has been wondering if this is or should be the direction of the San Gabriel Mission Playhouse as we continue to move forward. Since then, we have brought in a consultant to look at our operation, reviewed and revised our fee schedule to increase revenue by 11% pending approval, corrected and updated our facility information guide, and reduced or canceled services and utilities that were no longer being used and putting a strain on our operating overhead. Even with all of this work, we are still without a firm direction in which we should be headed. We ask the question, is the Playhouse an organization whose purpose is to generate revenue for the city, or is the Playhouse an organization whose purpose it is to provide a home for the arts and cultures without a focus on revenue, or is it some combination of the two? To answer this is fundamental to our operation. Without this answer, we have no direction. At our last council meeting where the budget was presented to all of you, 4 out of the 5 of you brought up the cost of the Playhouse as concerns of yours, which I completely understand. In a time of financial qualms, the Playhouse is an easy target. But in these times, I ask that you remember that what we provide to not only our rental clients, but to our patrons and citizens. The centerpiece of the Mission District and all of our large community engagement events is the Mission Playhouse. The most historically significant city-owned facility we take so much pride in hosting our community stakeholder meetings in, the facility where our own Senator Susan Rubio selected to be sworn in at, the place where we host over 15 school graduations, the facility that houses large trainings for not only our fire and police department, but everyone citywide, and the location that houses our very own state of the city is the Mission Playhouse. Trust me that when I say that I understand we invest a good amount of money into the Mission Playhouse, but think about what we get out of it. Think about our citizens and what they get out of it, all for just 1.4% of the city's annual budget. Over the next week, you, the City Council, will be discussing the future of the Mission Playhouse in a study session next Tuesday. All right, well, that's it. I guess my last thing is give us an answer and give us a direction and a chance, and we'll make it happen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Elias. Yeah, and you could have finished it. That would have been fine. No problem. or just send us an email. All right, that's all the speakers' request cards I have. Is there anybody else who would like to speak to the City Council about the budget for the upcoming year? Okay, seeing none, I will close public comment. Next item.
Item 2, budget study session. Presentation will be given by Interim Finance Director Chamberlain.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. We have before you tonight a modified proposed budget for the 2019-20 fiscal year. Looking forward at our first slide. We have our original proposal to you of revenue of $40.9 million with prospective revenue of $750,000 against appropriations of $41.6 million with a balance of $10,000. We've gone back and taken a look at some of those numbers, and we talked about a little bit of it last week. Our now budget before you is $41 million in revenue with the $750,000 in prospective revenue against appropriations of $41.6. So now our balance has grown to $163,000 for the 2019-20 fiscal year. We heard and understood your concerns last week about the prospective revenue in next year's budget. We went back and did an analysis on it and came up with a alternative for your consideration. The first alternative is sale of Prop A funds. We have approximately $1 million in, for budget next year, $1,027,000 in Prop A funds. We can sell those funds to other cities within LA County. The going rate right now is 70 cents on a dollar, and that would produce $682,000 of revenue to the city. That would take our balance down to $96,000 going forward. Our second alternative is the, Adam, if you can hit the next one. Second alternative is the sale of the Prop A funds to bring in the $682,000, but also leave the $750,000 in there as prospective revenue for the sales tax. That would give our balance approximately $846,000 at the end of the year, which would begin to chip away at that deficit in there. We understand it's still prospective, it isn't been voted on, but we would clearly identify it as prospective, and showing that we could end the year with a positive balance of $800,000 would be good for our auditors to see that we're chipping away at the amount of that deficit. So we recommend doing both of them going forward. We understand that it's one time, but it would reduce the fund balance deficit, and it would provide the staff time to determine funding shortfalls for current services ongoing, evaluate prospective growth of revenue sources against expected cost increases, and allow us to strategize planned reductions if needed. Reconciling the fund balance numbers, beginning the balance again with the $2.6 million deficit, with the recommended from last week's balance of the $39 million in revenue and transfer in, expenditures $38 million. We were going to end the year with a negative $2.4 million. That's including the beginning balance of 2.6. And as we stated last week, it's not the fund balance. This point is the available balance because it includes capital project money that would carry forward. We were recommending taking all those capital projects out by eliminating the Station 52 upgrade project, the police facility project, the Del Mar, or moving those to the development impact fees, and deleting the funding for Del Mar rehab wells, which has been completed, and the $52,000 for the Great Streets project. That would take us down to going forward for next year of $1.5 million deficit, and then if we include this prospective revenue, it would take us down to, for fund balance, would take us down to 1.2. I'm sorry, the estimated balance going forward would be 1.5. That includes some of the carryovers that would remain, And then the estimated fund balance by the end of the 2019-20 fiscal year would be down to $1.2 million, almost $1.3 million deficit, which in essence reduces your fund balance by 50%. Going forward. Already covered that one. What's up next is June 18th is the public hearing to adopt the budget. You'll have resolutions to adopt the operating budget, the capital improvement program, and the GAN calculation, and then we will be doing update to fees in July. And that concludes.
Okay, thank you, Paula. Are there any questions of the council, from the council? Yes.
Hey, Paula, could you please explain one more time on the second to last slide, that last line before the total that says carry over to next year? What were you carrying over? That 283,000?
There are some remaining smaller projects. There's the housing element plan. Is that one? Yeah. There's a couple of them that are still carrying forward from this year to next.
Okay, okay. It just would not let us trying to figure out what they were. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Yes,
Thank you,
sir.
Mayor.
Yes.
Paula, can you explain how does this sort of exchange of Prop A process? Is there some kind of a agency that dealing with this sales of Prop A?
The Prop A money is administered by LA Metro, and
Okay.
they have to approve the sale. And so what happens is we go out and we try to find people that are looking to buy Prop A money, and that they'll exchange it. I did contact LA Metro before the meeting, and they're the ones that told me that the going rate is 70 cents on the dollar. And they also gave me a list of the cities that had purchased and sold in the last 2 years, so we can start contacting them. We also have a finance officer's website where we can send out global emails. So we'd send it out to everybody in LA County saying, does anyone want to buy
Right.
the funds?
Okay. So in the past, I guess the City of Industry
Yes.
always buys our Prop A funding. And I found out because they have a bus terminal at the Point Hill Mall.
Right.
And so maybe that's the reason they need all these extra funding for their transportation purpose. But I kind of agree to this, for short term. But we've been doing this for many years.
Yes.
We haven't, have our own local transit. That's what this Prop A is for. But I think for the long term, because this funding is supposed, 3 years, right? If we don't use it and we have to
Correct.
return the money. But if we can have our own local transit, actually we can bring in more funding, much more, from Metro, from state transportation department. So I just think maybe, one time is okay, but if for the long term, I think we just have to plan how we're going to have our own local transit. Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? Vice Mayor Machaca?
Real quick, when you say update fee schedule, aside from the Mission Playhouse, what other fee schedules would we be looking at? Permits, business licenses? Is it
We're looking at the Mission Playhouse and recreation for right now, and I think there's a couple just miscellaneous police and fire fees that they're looking at. The business license one would require a vote, so we're not looking at that one right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I just wanted to clarify, what, if anything, are we currently using Prop A funds for?
We use part of it for the Dial-A-Ride program,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not sure with the rest of it. Mark?
How much are we funding of the Dial-A-Ride program with Prop A?
Yeah, that is in my handy dandy book right here.
Yes. I guess we could look at the budget. Maybe we're here to talk about that.
Prop A is Fund 180. It's on page 117 in the special revenue funds. And it's, the city's dial-a-ride for the elderly and disabled is what we're using it primarily for now.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
It's on page 17 of the special revenue funds.
Right, I'm looking at that now. Prop A exchange.
And under fund description, the funding supports the city's dial-a-ride services. And I believe there's a couple more programs in there, but I'm not familiar with them, so I will ask. Rebecca can give us some more information on that.
In addition, good evening, Mayor and Council. In addition to dial-a-ride, there is some funding that is used from Prop A for some staff costs associated with the dial-a-ride program, as well as I believe there are administrative staff costs as well for finance staff that handle all of the processing and auditing and such of the Prop A funds.
Okay. I'm still not able to really readily see how much of it is funded out of Prop A versus. So in other words, you know, if we do the Prop A exchange, then obviously we'll have to backfill whatever these expenditures are that are currently from Prop A from the general fund, I assume.
No, this
No?
is already accounting for the continuing the service. These are surplus funds. So we would still be continuing the dial-a-ride program in the same way that we are doing this year, and only selling available funds.
So we're just,
Yes.
where were the funds allocated previous to this? Was there any allocation, or it was just staying in Prop A fund?
We've been selling them every 2 years.
Yeah, I
So
understand, but
I think we've just been using them for the Prop A and then saving them and selling them, and then just, I mean, the dial-a-ride program, it looks like we've been selling the excess money in the
Every
fund
other year.
every 2 years after we accumulate them. So looks like we,
we're just selling a little earlier then? Or would this be the normal year we would have sold them?
this would have been the normal year.
So this year we decided previously we didn't have them we didn't have them for
We
sale.
did not have it in the budget to do no.
Okay, thank you.
I think
'Cause-
on the slide before, you had the list of when it was previously sold.
Yeah.
Right there on the bottom. So we sold it in 2010, 11, 2012, 13, 2014, 15, and 2016, 17.
Right. So according to my calculations, then in order to generate $682,500 of general funds at a 70 cents on the dollar discount, it means that we currently have then a fund balance of $975,000 of Prop A funds. Is that correct?
We're looking to have $1,027,000, but we didn't want to cut it that close, so we cut it back down to $975,000.
Okay. So we would still have looks like there's $501,000 being funded out of Prop A for dial-a-ride.
Correct.
And that contract, however, as I recall, is now $30,000 a month. That's only $360,000. What's the remaining would be for staffing?
I don't know. I can find out. Linda, do?
There we go, the details.
Good evening, council members.
Hi.
Other than the senior dial-a-ride, there are senior trips that's also funded out of Prop A funds. When you're thinking of personnel costs, it is limited because this fund is very restricted. According to Metro, for administrative costs, for example, for staffing time, it cannot be over 25% of the program cost expenditure. So the majority of it will definitely be for senior dial-a-ride or the senior trips. And again, staffing, if they do not allow us to go over 25%. So between the two programs, we oftentimes do not use up the whole budget. So that's why we're oftentimes have remaining budgets so we can do the Prop A fund exchange every other year. I'm sorry, transportation only? Yes, the transportation only. they're very restrictive, so therefore that's why it's, we can't really use it on a whole lot of other program. Prop A is very restrictive, and Prop C is a little bit more for other transportations.
Yes, yeah, we understand that. Thank you.
And to clarify that, for the senior trips, it's actually just the transportation for the trip, not the actual event.
And not the staffing associated with that. 25% of 501,000 would be 120. Roughly 125.
That's the most that we can charge.
Mm-hmm. Plus the 360 for the contract itself is 485, so it's pretty close to that, yeah. Okay, so you're saying there would be no adverse effect to the general fund to do this because we have enough Prop A funds built up to be able to both fund the $501,000 that we currently would be allocating for Dial-A-Ride and senior trips, staff costs associated with that, and exchange $975,000 worth to yield $682,500 of general funds.
Yes, sir.
All right. Should we, I feel like, maybe that would be a threshold discussion that we should have, or just get a show of hands, a straw poll of whether or not we want to do that for the current year. I think it does also alleviate the problem, I guess depends on how you look at it, but the issue of having $750,000 of prospective revenue in the budget, because it's not exact, obviously, but should we either, the 750 is only available if we actually do pass a sales tax measure in November. If we end up waiting till March, then we also will not have that. That would also not wipe out that 750. So that's why I think it is prudent for us to be conservative, because given this as well, if it's not, either we're not successful at all or we don't even go out to a vote until March, we would still have a balanced budget with the sale of the Prop A funds and the current allocations under here. It's just in the balance would, on the left-hand side under Alternative 1, yeah, well, it shows it right there, would be 96,000 instead of the 846.
I had a question.
Yes.
So if we would move forward with Alternative 1 and we do pass the ballot measure in November, then we would come back and amend the budget to reflect the increase in revenues?
We certainly could. We wouldn't need to, because we don't need to amend it for under revenue projections, but it would have the same effect if we amended the budget and brought it in, versus as long as we didn't appropriate it and spend based on that, we would end up at the end of the year putting that money into our fund balance deficit, so it would have the same net effect.
Okay, I'm sorry, when you say same net, so if we picked Alternative 1 that does not have the prospective revenue, we pass it in November, we should have more, we would increase our revenues by 750,000, so there is an impact.
You're right. We wouldn't need to amend the budget, though, to bring that in, unless we were looking to spend another $750,000.
Oh, that's what you mean.
Otherwise,
okay.
It just goes into our fund balance either way.
Which would reduce our overall reserve deficit that
Correct.
we have.
So we'd end up with end of scenario of Alternative 2. It's just an accounting of whether you'd like to show that and put it in our budget going forward, and that we would anticipate having an $846,000 surplus at the end of the year, or whether you'd not show that and have us be at the $96,000 level.
Anybody else?
I would just comment, I appreciate staff this quickly turning it around and coming up with ideas. I think that's it's I like alternative one as well, Jason. I think it shows kind of where we are. Hopefully we can be at alternative two, but and if we do, it just gets funded and we can reduce our deficit. I think I'm all for alternative one, and I would just point out that the reason I've always been against these propositions is because we are getting 17 cents on the dollar, and then now we're selling it for 30%. Because every time we do a proposition, it's full of strings. When we do something like this sales tax, there's no strings. The council decides, we get 100% on the dollar, and we decide. And so I've always advocated against pretty much any proposition that comes along because they never benefit San Gabriel. They're always quote unquote regional. And I realize we have to partner with the region, but if San Gabriel can handle itself, then we don't depend on the region. And then if each individual city can handle itself, it doesn't depend on the county. And if cities aren't depending on the county to have a bunch of strings, and the county's not depending on the state, and all of a sudden we're running our city ourselves without people telling us what to do. And we can solve our own problems like homelessness and all those other things. So that's kind of why I've always been against propositions. Echoing back to Chin, the conversation we had probably about 2 years ago, because you're always asking me why I'm against propositions, and this is exactly why.
Okay. Anybody else? Julie?
I just had a quick question, Paula. On the original revenue was 40,869,000 and now revised at 41. It's about $180,000 increase. Where did we find that?
$50,000 of it I brought up last week, where there was a difference between what we were had in overtime reimbursable and the overtime revenue. So that's 50,000 of it. And then Public Works has identified almost $130,000 of money that's been held in trust that should be in the general fund for services that have been rendered. They're still working on that, so I anticipate that that'll be complete in next year. So
Okay.
it'll be increasing in next year's revenue.
Thank you.
And if we push, some of the facilities such as Station 52 and the new police station to impact fees, would that mean that we would need to increase those impact fees, those development impact fees?
You mean
I know
the rates? The rates or the budgets?
The rates, because as I understand, I know we have some fund balances in those fees. In fact, that's in a way borrowing from some of those is how we're managing to get through the end of the end of the fiscal year. So anyway, I guess I'm sure the calculations haven't been done yet, and I know we set those, we the council sets those fees every year, but would it necessitate then, because I want to say we were putting about 1.7 million each year from the general fund to the new police station. Is that correct, or is it 1.2? I know it's a significant amount. Does Chief know, or?
There's no reserve for the police station. We did spend some money out of general fund for the capital project of the police facility. I'm not sure what was done, but there's no reserve set aside for the police facility.
There's nothing in the fund at current.
Not in the development impact fee fund.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, not the development impact fee. In the police station, account itself. I don't know how to. I know we spent money. Obviously, we've cleared the back and all that, but there was some funds in there. Not a lot, but I don't think it was that much.
Well, the chief said there was about $800,000 budgeted every year to be put aside, but there is no reserve anywhere holding that money.
If I recall, let me see here. Let me take a quick look.
And we have a development impact fee fund, but that's not from contributions from the general fund. That's contributions from developers.
Right. 228.19. So it looks like spent including through 228.19. So on page 113 of the CIP, there's 2.8 million still allocate. I don't know how, in fact, it may not be a formal fund, but I think it, I mean, it's designated with a separate CIP number, so it may just be commingled with other general funds, obviously. But it looks like there's 2.8 million currently allocated for the police station.
No, that's spent and encumbered, so it's already been spent.
But so this is not the balance. This is
No.
what the expenditures.
The remaining funding was the 606,000 next to it, and we've already released part of that, and the rest of it is what we're asking to transfer to come not paid out of general fund, to be paid out of development impact fees.
Okay. And let me take a quick, I just want to take a quick look at the Station 52 upgrade. I think it should be the next one. It looks like 191,000 remaining.
You found it before I did. What page is it on?
115. Is that the?
115. Yeah, there was $191,000 left, and we're
Right.
asking that to be transferred to the development impact fees as well. And there is sufficient money in the development impact fee fund right now to cover what we're asking to move. And for budgeting going forward, we were very conservative on what to budget because we don't know what it is. We didn't want to overestimate it all. We did have community development and public works take a look at that. Even from that, we cut it back because we're just not sure. We don't want to budget something we're not sure is going to be coming in. So what we're recommending can already be covered by what's in the fund.
Okay. And do you remind me the timing too of the payment of those fees? Is it usually when building permits are pulled?
Yes.
So even when there are entitled projects, we don't actually receive any of those funds until they've, cleared the building plan process.
Until they pay all their fees, yes.
Okay. Well, I mean, obviously, I think it's just a, I don't know, allocation, I guess,
Yes.
really. Because I guess, whether or not future development impact fees would be, completely sufficient, I think is a big question. But I understand it's basically just removing the burden from the general fund, at least for the current year. And then going forward, we'll need to, I think, reevaluate how, if at all, we, end up financing some of those capital improvements. And is it still the price tag for the new police station is, what, 27 million, 30 million? Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So I had a question from the last study session. I was kind of thinking once I got home, I wish I'd asked it then. It was rather almost like a passing comment regarding the Sheraton when the property was improved. And oftentimes when there's such a large improvement on a property, the owner contests it with the county as far as reassessing. Now, I don't know the exact process there. Does the landowner have to pay what they believe the assessment should be, and then they litigate the difference or negotiate the difference? Or, I mean, do we receive those, or we receive nothing? We receive the old rate, or how does that work?
We don't get, I don't believe we get anything until it's actually paid. And even then it goes into the supplemental tax rate and we get a portion of it.
So we're expecting probably a retro payment for the the delta of the old and what they've been paying and what they should have paid, correct?
No, it goes into the supplemental tax rate, and that is allocated to LA County.
But they disperse it based on property value, correct? Don't they have to make a disbursement to us on property taxes?
Well, yes, but it's based on LA County assessments, not just San Gabriel, for the supplemental rate.
What am I not getting?
It doesn't make sense, I know.
So when there's a property increase, the property tax goes to?
No, when the property tax increases, normally increases 2% every year, or if it's resold or anything like
I
that.
mean a reassessment.
Or reassessment, any of those, then yes, San Gabriel gets the increase, or portion of the increase. But when they're assessing it and they haven't paid the tax yet and they're fighting with the tax assessor of how much it should be, once they pay it, it goes into a supplemental fund. And my understanding from this year, talking to our HDL representative, it actually gets dispersed to all the cities in the supplemental tax pool, which would hurt us in this one, but I imagine over the years it's benefited us because it is countywide, it's not just San Gabriel.
So that money doesn't come to us, and for those years, just what was...
Just a piece of it.
So we don't even get the rate we should have received?
Not for those years, no. So once it kicks in, we should see a pretty good increase in property tax.
So the year after it kicks in, we'll start to see the actual rate back to us?
Correct.
So we need to start talking to the Sheraton and say, hey, settle this.
Yeah.
To that end, we even talked to the consultant about whether we could require an agreement when we sign some sort of a participation agreement, whether they would have to stipulate that they wouldn't fight that value so that we can get the money more quickly, and they couldn't come up with a way to help us do that.
No. But they are helping us draft letters to the county to try to get them on board to speed up a little bit.
I mean, the county has no incentive to speed it up.
No.
I mean, they're going to collect what they're going to collect.
Correct.
And obviously the property owner is not going to just give money away. They're going to fight. But we just need to say, hey, come on, partner with us, because now the best thing you can do for our community is to resolve this as quickly as possible.
Correct.
Just a little bit of diplomacy.
Okay. So I think, we still have the outstanding question of whether we, want to adopt a budget that, I guess which of these two alternatives do we want? It comes down to that, right? So it's, do we adopt the budget with the prospective revenue or not? I mean, it's possible for us to also just, what was presented, right, is actually alternative 0, which is, prospective budget, prospective revenue of $750,000, but no sale of Prop A funds. So, and I hear, Councilmember Harrington says he prefers alternative 1, where we pass a budget that includes the sale of the Prop A, but not the prospective revenue. So. Okay. Yes. Okay. Seems to be there's a consensus of the council. Then I guess you would like to use alternative 1. Trying to think. Okay. So that's pretty clear. And I guess, is there any other things that we kind of really need to discuss? Because I think everything else then remains the same, essentially, right? Programmatically, it's just a matter of, basically replacing in the current budget document, the draft budget document, the prospective revenue with the sale of the Prop A.
That's correct. So our meeting a week from tonight, we will have a table in your staff report that shows those differences and where they will be inserted into this document. And once that's approved by the City Council at the public hearing, then we'll prepare a final budget document that gets distributed that has a printed version of all of those. So you'll see very clearly next week any changes that we've made to what you have in front of you today.
Okay.
And Mayor Pooh, just moving forward for next year, we are planning a mid-year budget analysis review.
Absolutely.
Not only a mid-year, but a first quarter as well.
Sounds great. Thank you.
So, Mayor Pooh, I'd
Yes.
like to ask our city manager what's current polling for sales tax measure, and maybe for next week meeting, can you come up with that report, or no, or it's too early?
I have a conference call on Friday with our polling consultant, so I can't promise that I'll have stuff ready for next week, but as soon as I possibly can, we will present that to the council and have our other consultant here and decide how to move forward. And we will start that right away.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anyone else?
What was the deadline again for the council to vote whether to move forward? Was it July, or is it, what was the date? I know there's a date.
It's the first week of August, but or after our first meeting in August. So we could be up against it and do it in August, but I'd rather not, and I'd rather put it on our second meeting in July, so we have one meeting to fudge if we need to move it back one.
And I don't want to compare city managers, but Arcadia got theirs passed.
But their election's by mail.
My kids always say don't try and compare us, but so I won't say anything.
I think we all know you picked the wrong Lazaretto.
And now you put that on record. Come on, your brother's going to put that on YouTube now.
Exactly. Okay, so is there anything else that we need to discuss this evening? It's turned out to be pretty quick.
Yeah, fruitful.
Yeah. Well, hopefully not. I mean, you know, obviously, I think it's, you know, the way we've been discussing it internally is that, you know, the budget is balanced, but it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
Correct.
And so, you know, this is a Band-Aid measure for the current year, but going forward, if the sales tax measure doesn't pass, then there will be, you know, serious cuts necessary, and those are the things that we need to, you know, sort of start to anticipate and plan for, it, you know, just in case. Because I think, you know, the reason, and I pulled this up from a previous study session on April 2nd, I think when we first became aware of the general fund balance issue, you know, there's this slide here about how we had estimated certain revenues, but then the difference was, you know, $1 million, you know, $2 million, $3 million over various years, over the past several years. You know, clearly, we don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past either. So, you know, there will be ongoing discussions, and I think, you know, Elias's comment from earlier was well taken. I don't think anybody here on the dais, you know, doesn't appreciate the Mission Playhouse, and certainly, like, you know, we wouldn't do anything drastic, you know, without careful thought and consideration of all the options. And we haven't even really been presented yet with anything concrete in that regard. So I would say, you know, for the current year, it's a quote-unquote status quo budget, which means nothing from the current fiscal year will really be changed or different. Staffing levels, so forth and so on, all exactly the same. What we're struggling with is how do we basically backfill this general fund deficit. You know, if you're looking at the CAFR, which is the audited financials of the city, it only showed up in this most recent year. So when I said this study session on April 2nd, that CAFR comes out in January, is it? Or is it December?
Somewhere between December and February.
Somewhere between December and February. So after the first quarter of the next fiscal year, I guess we'll get another update on how we're doing. And then the mid-year thing, I think, is really important, where we actually look at how did we actually end the current fiscal year. And by then, we would also know more or less, not more or less, we will know, you know, whether the sales tax measure, you know, if we put it on the ballot in November, whether it passes or not, or if, you know, we're putting it on the ballot for March. It's basically those two options. That's the only way in order to have a, you know, ongoing sustainable budget. So,
One point that I'd like to clarify.
yes.
You'll have your audited financials by the time you do your mid-year, but by first quarter, you should have a very good indication of how general fund ended. All the accruals are done by that time. It's just all the special revenue funds and all the closing of the official books and all that takes longer. But the actual numbers should be pretty much done in the general fund. So
I see.
just a little tweaking, but nothing significant.
Okay. Okay, that's good to know as well. All right. Anybody else? Okay. Actually, you know what? I know this is unusual, but since we have an audience here, community members and staff here, I'll open up another round of public comment the way we do for our normal council meetings now. So if there's anybody in the audience who would like to ask any questions or address the council regarding this item, we'll hear you now. No? You're keeping your eggs and tomatoes for what, the State of the City address?
Next week.
Next week, yeah, for the hearing, for the actual hearing. Well, you know, say there's only one target, it makes it easier to hit. Yeah, okay, then I'll close that public comment, and we are adjourned till the next regular City Council meeting. Thank you.